Today I'm going to try to explain you the topic of second publication right into the academic field. So the question is, am I allowed to republish my scientific article as open access? In order to answer this question, it's not enough to consider copyright law. We also need to take into consideration the Swiss Code of Obligations, which regulates contracts. In fact, when the researcher wants to publish their scientific article, they need to enter into an agreement with the publisher through a contract. In general, the Code of Obligations gives parties the freedom to regulate their relationships as best suits their needs. This is also called contractual freedom. But in order to guarantee that the interests of the parties involved in a contract are in harmony with the whole society, the Code of Obligations gives rules and suggestions on how to create a contract, how to handle aspects that are not mentioned in a contract, and what to do when parties disagree. So the Swiss Code of Obligations provides the main rule, which is that the author grants to the publisher the exclusive rights of the work that will be published. That means that the author, the researcher, is not allowed anymore to republish, to reuse their scientific publications, not even in other versions. However, to guarantee that the information is accessible to the public at large and to satisfy the interests of the entire society, there are exceptions to this main rule. Therefore, the Code of Obligations distinguishes three different situations. The first case is about larger works, books, monographs. This case follows the main rule explained before. So the publisher has the exclusive right and is the only one allowed to publish and distribute this work until the contract expires, which is usually defined in the contract. If not, that happens when the editions defined in the contract are out of print, or for ebooks, when the publisher doesn't promote anymore the work. Only then the author gets back the rights and can republish the work elsewhere or reuse, redistribute the work. This rule protects the publisher's financial investment, which in case of larger works is quite consistent. The second case is about short essays and newspaper articles. In this case, authors are allowed to republish their work at any time because it is considered that newspaper articles and short essays have a very short lifespan. A newspaper article is already old the next day, and people will not pay for reading it anymore the day after. The investment of the publisher is thus not at risk if the newspaper article is republished immediately. The third case lies in between the previous two scenarios, and it's about larger articles of journals and contributions to collections. This is in fact the scenario that is most relevant in the scientific community. The Swiss Code of Obligations defines a so-called embargo period of 3 months during which the author is not allowed to republish or reuse the work. By doing so, it finds a balance between the interests of the publisher on one side, granting the exclusivity for 3 months, and those of the author, the researcher, who is then allowed to republish elsewhere the work after this period of time. 3 months are considered enough, as similarly to newspaper articles, scientific publications also are meant to inform the public about new findings. There is a great interest in learning about these findings while they are fresh, but the level of novelty fades away with time. It is thus right to protect the interests and the investments of the publishers for a certain while, but not for too long. This is the so-called second publication right. However, it may be that a longer embargo period has been agreed in the contract between the publisher and the author. It is controversial if such a contract with a longer embargo prevails over the law, which, as we have seen, foresees an embargo period of only 3 months. The next question is which version of the scientific article can be republished? The answer is simple. It is the final version, which is the object of the contract between the publisher and the author. However, also in this case, it is possible that in the contract something different has been defined, like, for example, the possibility of publishing the preprint version. What we have just explained only applies if the governing law is Swiss. In any case, mentioning the applicable national law in the contract is always better in order to avoid confusion. Most other countries have similar rules regarding second publication right, but the length of the embargo period might differ, ranging from 3 months up to 12 months. To conclude, we can thus say that according to the Swiss Code of Obligations, authors are allowed to republish and reuse their scientific articles and contributions to collections after an embargo of 3 months. However, be careful if in the contract a longer embargo period is defined. Always pay attention to the publishing contract. In particular, check if an embargo period is defined, if a version of republication is defined, and check which governing law applies.